Okay. Can you hear me okay? So we're reading through the lectionary, using the King James Bible, but it's the Anglican Lectionary. And we're starting off by reading from Psalms. And this is from Psalm 80. So let's just turn to Psalm 80, that we heard earlier on today. Psalm 80. Okay. And one of the things that really strikes me here is going back to the fact that God is a shepherd. He's the shepherd of Israel. It says, and you who lead Joseph like a flock. So we're going back to this shepherding of God, this looking after his own flock, his own people. And one of the things that really kind of impresses me here in verse 1, the end of verse 1, beginning verse 2, you who are enthroned upon the cherubim, shine forth before Ephraim and Benjamin and Manasseh. Stir up your might and come to save us. Now, this is a picture, obviously, of the Ark of the Covenant, if you remember. And the Ark of the Covenant sat in the Holy of Holies. And God was there between the cherubim on his mercy seat. And wherever the Ark of the Covenant went and the people of God went, God was there. And so therefore all the might of God was fully there and fully present whenever the tabernacle was erected and the Holy of the Holies was installed, and the Ark would be put inside the Holy of the Holies, and it was built up around that. And, that would be the place where God would dwell and God would speak to his people. So, this is a real picture of the might of God, and just this amazing picture of God sitting between the angels, the cherubim, the ones that guard God's the Garden of Eden. They had two cherubim on either side with swords stopping them from going back into the Garden of Eden, and that kind of signifies the power and the might. Whenever the Bible talks about the horns of the altar, and there would be these kind of quite ornate horns shown on the altar, which signified strength. The horn signifies strength. And so therefore we've got this picture, this big God, this mighty God, this marvellous and all-powerful, all-knowing God. And this is what the psalmist kind of wants us to realise and wants us to remember. And he's saying, you are mighty, you are enthroned upon the cherubim. Restore us, O God, let your face shine that we may be saved. And even that, let your face shine. They would remember Moses coming down from the mountain, coming down from Mount Sinai, and his face shone. And he had to put a veil over his face because his face shone, because he was in the presence of God. And the people were frightened of that, because that is quite striking, isn't it? It's quite powerful to know that God can do that to a person. And we joked about being set alight and the fire engines going past this morning, but in our worship. but in a sense, God can totally set us alight inside, and even to the point where our faces can shine. And there's something about us when we're in the presence of God. Something happens, something really amazing happens in our heart, that just we kind of shine out, and not quite the same way as Moses did, but there is something when you know that someone is filled with the Spirit and someone is walking in the Spirit and trusting God, and they really have the mind of Christ. There is something that shines. There is a real shining in them that you cannot help but notice, that when someone is really at peace and someone is really all out for God, there is something really quite unique about that. And kindred spirits, we can actually sense that in one another, and we are drawn to that. And to a certain degree, so is the outside world. And the psalmist says, how long will you be angry with your people's prayers? You know, how long will you be angry? You fed them with the bread of tears, and given them tears to drink in full measure. So there was a great deal of problems going on. And, you know, it says, you make us the scorn of our neighbours, our enemies laugh among ourselves. And there is a sense that you've got this idea that the people of God were in some way dissatisfied that God wasn't really redeeming them. God was allowing them to go through these trials and problems. And the whole point was to bring them back to God, because they were always drifting away. And it's the same for us today, that God only wants to bring us back to himself. And so when we go through many problems, sometimes people have to go through problems before they come to the point of coming back to God. You know, it's only because God doesn't make us robots. God gives us our own life. God gives us the life to live, and gives us that will to do right and to do wrong, so that, you know, sometimes we need to realise that God wants us to come back to himself, and he draws us back to himself. And so we can be going through trials and problems, but we know that God wants us to come back to him. And, you know, often people don't come to God until they get to such a low point in their lives. When they get to the end of themselves, when they get to that point when they go, you know what, I've made a right mess of my life. You know, there is nothing really that I seem to be able to do to make it any better. And the fact that I have just gone away from God, it means that my life is not working. It's not working the way I would really like. So in my endeavours to find my own life and to follow my own ways, I have come to the point where it hasn't worked. And things have gone wrong. And because I'm not following God, things are not working out for me. And they get to a point of almost to despair sometimes, get to the point of, like this psalmist, crying out